Hi everybody, Quilt Doc here, today to share with you all the information you need to make our first ever challenge quilt called the Cerulean Sky. Now I designed it, and I'm a little bit biased, but I think it's a real beauty. Now before we get into the details of how to make it, I want to share with you all of why I designed this quilt in the first place. When I'm helping out at my local quilt shop, the number one question that I get from customers is, what color fabric goes best with my sunbonnet, Sue, whatever fabric that they're working with? Now I don't know what colors you like. I don't know what colors I like today. They're always changing. They're based on the quilt. Now I love spending other people's money on fabric. Who wouldn't? But let's face it, picking fabric is hard. It's the most important step that we take when designing a quilt. The wrong fabric can ruin an otherwise great design, and the colors that I pick might be the colors that you hate, right? So how do we start? What do we do? Color theory is a huge field and a very interesting one too. But today we aren't going to delve too deeply into that particular pond. Instead, we're going to use the Cerulean Sky quilt to focus on one aspect of color theory. And that aspect is value. Now sometimes people confuse value with intensity. Intensity is about saturation. Take for instance this color blue. It isn't very intense, especially when you compare it to this color blue, which is more saturated, it's richer. This one would have the higher intensity. Intensity and saturation are different than value. Value is about how light or dark a color is when compared to the other colors that it's playing with. For instance, take this fabric. On its own, it's pretty easy for me to say that it's pretty high value. It's fairly dark. But when I put it next to another fabric, you can see that it's all relative. This one gets much lighter when compared to the darker blue. If you learned anything from this video, learn this. Like everything else in life, color value is subjective. It's determined by context, about what colors it's playing with. One dark color, one might be the highest value in one quilt and the lowest in another. It's all about perspective. Now that we know what color value is, we need to know how to use it. Sometimes it's not really easy to find, especially when the color values are close. So I recommend take your camera into the quilt shop with you, lay the fabrics that you like next to each other, and take a picture. Use a black and white filter on your camera to look at the colors close to each other, next to each other. When they're in black and white, it's easy to determine which one is the darkest and which one is the lightest. Now, a general rule is that darker colors tend to go to the back of the quilt, and that lighter colors tend to float on the top of the quilt. That's because we see light first. Whatever's the lightest thing on our quilt is the thing that we're going to look at first. But you can play with this. You can manipulate the value in all kinds of ways. You can put light things in the background. You can put the medium things all together. You can create entire secondary designs in your quilt block just by playing with value. In quilt making, value can be a lot of fun because you get to decide what shapes in the block you want to bring to the foreground and which ones you want to send to the back. You can create an entire secondary design in the background of a quilt if you're careful about value placement. So back to our quilt. I wanted to design a quilt that allowed me to experiment with value. I also wanted to make a blue and white quilt because everybody was making blue and white quilts and I didn't have one yet. So I made mine blue. You don't have to make yours blue. If you want to make yours a different color, go ahead. It just has to be monochromatic. You can play with all different colors of red or yellow, orange. It just has to be one color. Now when I sat down to design this quilt, I knew that not only did I want it to be blue and white, but I also wanted to use up all these half-square triangles that I've been making. So I looked at some half-square triangle samplers, and what I found was that they're all, well, kind of boring. Then I looked at some other quilts that were made with half-square triangles that seemed to really pop. They were moving in the picture. They seemed, I don't know, more exciting. When I broke them down, I realized that what they were doing in these quilts was that they were changing the grid size in the blocks. So take for instance any traditional quilt that's in a grid. Usually they're 4x4 or 6x6 or whatever they are, and then that grid is the same throughout the quilt. Well, what I found was that if we manipulated the grid size, that the blocks started to dance, started to move around, kind of vibrated in a way that I thought was really exciting. Enough already about how I designed the quilt. Let's talk about how you can participate, how you can make this challenge quilt. All you have to do is send me an email. All the information is down below. Each month will give you a little bit more of the quilt to work on. And because each block is repeated 2, 3, 4 times, you'll be able to experiment with your color placement and fabric choice. So let's go over the rules. Now, the rules are kind of important because we're going to have a viewer's choice style voting at the end. We want things to stay fair. What can you win? A $200 worth of long arm quilting from yours truly. That's right. Whoever gets the most votes, whoever's quilt is the most innovative and interesting, the one that we all like the most, gets a $200 gift card to my studio. We'll also be giving out prizes along the way for the most interesting block design, the most innovative use of color value, all sorts of things. But you need to sign up to get involved. You can share with us your quilt progress as we go on the Quilt Doc homepage, and you can send me pictures of your progress and I can share them in our month-to-month videos. So here are the rules for the Cerulean Sky Challenge. Number 1, quilts must be monochromatic. They must be made with one primary color. You may use any neutral background color, white, beige, black, or gray for instance, but the background fabric must be consistent throughout the entire quilt. Number 2, you can use prints, solids, batiks, or any kind of fabric, but if there is a pattern, it must be monochromatic. 3, if you choose to use another color that isn't blue, you have to name your quilt something else. I mean, cerulean means intensely blue, so it doesn't make much sense if your quilt is yellow. 4, you can play with how the color values are used in each block. You do not have to repeat the same color placement in repeated blocks, but you can if you choose to do so. 5, you have to make all the blocks in the pattern. If the quilt calls for 4 churn dashes, you have to make 4 churn dashes. However, at the end, you can set them however you want. 6, you can join the challenge at any time and make the blocks in any order. 7, quilt tops need to be finished and photographed by October 1st, 2019 to be considered for the Viewer's Choice Prize that we will vote on in October. Finally, for the first 30 people that sign up, I'll give you an acrylic ruler that you can use to make and trim a 5x5 grid 12-inch block easily. To sign up, just shoot an email to the address below with your name, email address, and a physical address I can use to send you the ruler. I promise I won't share it with anybody. That'll about do it for this video. I am so excited about making this quilt with you. Make sure that you share it with your guilds, your friends, your neighbors, anybody who wants to make a quilt. It'll be a lot of fun and I hope we'll learn a lot together. See you soon. Could you help me pick out this color fabric? What color fabric goes best with this sunbonnet suit? Right?